We revisited former acting Secret Service Director Ron Rowe's testimony before a Senate committee last July. We revisited it yesterday in advance of our conversation with Susan Crabtree from RealClearPolitics.com because of the hi-hat that Rowe gave Josh Hawley and those members of the Senate who dared to question the decision-making of the Secret Service or the accountability subsequent to the failed assassination attempt in Butler. It wasn't going to be a rush to judgment, Ron Rowe told those senators and the American public by extension. You know, it was all of a kind, not just then, but really up until now, of this exchange between Rowe and Hawley, Josh Hawley, senator from Missouri, when it came to the question of, the elevated position that was left unguarded, the obvious question that even a layman can understand was an oversight, a mistake, incompetence, use the descriptor of your choosing. This was that exchange. This is back at the end of July of last year.
Do you know if someone was supposed to be on the roof? Do you know if someone was in fact? That's what the whistleblowers tells me. That may or may not be accurate. Do you know that to be the fact? Was somebody posted to the roof, local law enforcement or whomever?
I do not know that to be a fact.
Well, can I ask you why you don't know that?
Again, Senator, we are looking at this, and they should have been on that roof. And the fact that they were in the building is something that I'm still trying to understand.
I just want to express my frustration, Director, that 17 days or whatever it's been, that whistleblowers are telling us more than you are, and you don't know, you haven't ascertained if there was supposed to be law enforcement on the roof. That seems like a pretty basic fact. I'm also told that local law enforcement suppliers offered the Secret Service drones, and you declined them. Is that true?
So, Senator, one, I've been very transparent and forthcoming.
Yeah. Your agency has not been transparent and forthcoming, so please, let's not go there.
I have been forthcoming, sir.
That remains to be seen. You've been on the job a few days. So far, you've fired nobody. Now, the drones.
Thank you,
Were
sir.
you offered drones?
Senator
So
Hawley.
there was an offer to fly a drone on that day.
And why did you deny it?
Again, I think the ability of local law enforcement to provide an asset, we probably should have taken them up on it if it was offered.
And a year later, no one has still been fired. Of course, what we learn is half a dozen, according to Susan Crabtree's reporting, mainly junior level personnel were suspended without pay for between 10 days and 42 days. That's the accountability from an agency that was responsible for a catastrophic event because Corey Competerior was murdered, and almost an even more catastrophic event with a former president being murdered on the same day. Oh boy. Mike Olson is a retired Secret Service agent. He's also the co-founder and owner of 360 Security Services. 360security.services is where you get information on his firm. Mike Olson, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. You're welcome, Dan.
So a year later, and the report out recently that details the obvious failures, but doesn't really mete out much in the way of stringent punishment, I think, by most people's perspectives. What are we to make of that, even under, new political leadership, both at the presidential level as well as at the agency level?
So I think there's a lot of moving parts on this 1 year later, looking at the reform tables that the Secret Service just published last week that were some of the recommendations that came from the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs and then the House Task Force. Looking at, some of these things are things that existed 20 or more years ago that were things Secret Service should have been doing. All I can take away from that is things weren't properly put into some more stringent form of a policy in order to properly hold people accountable as you would in any organization. So in other words, well, I didn't do that, or I didn't know I was supposed to do that because there wasn't a policy for it. And I think all I can make this is that's a big piece of why we're seeing this and a failure to hold certain people accountable. And it's disappointing to see low-hanging fruit, be the biggest fall people in something like this when what we saw there was, there is a chain of command that exists in the Secret Service. And so certainly junior people, if in fact they were put in charge of, working a big site that they had no experience in, then there should have been extreme supervisory oversight. And then in that case, it would be a lot easier to hold people account to some of these failures that occurred. But it doesn't appear so.
Well, there's two things to that. One, and it was the routine that Ron Rowe did before that Senate committee last year. Now, of course, he's since left to go, to go to a safe space with Michael Chertoff. But I digress. What he did last year was nobody's responsible because everybody's responsible. It was an agency failure, so nobody individually is responsible. I'm not going to rush your judgment. It's what Josh Hawley said too. About it takes 17 days to get a simple answer to an obvious question. You're the director of the CIA. It strains the bounds of credulity. So that's one thing. Nobody's really responsible because everybody's responsible. It's just a general agency failure, so everybody gets protected more or less. That's number one. Number two, what you just said, which is this idea that there wasn't a memo or a governing agency best practices statement, so I'm not allowed to use my judgment, or I'm not responsible for using poor judgment. I mean, that's sort of something that happens in government at the K through 12 level, at government agencies, generally speaking. Like unless it's in a handbook or there was a memo written by somebody, if the agency failed to properly document what to do in every possible exigent circumstance under the sun, then exercising bad judgment isn't bad judgment at all because I wasn't told what to do in advance.
You're 100% right, Dan. And part of that problem is coupled with the fact of, just some of the general, for lack of a better description, human resource laws and policies and guidelines that guide federal hiring and firing. I mean, the running joke when I was in there was it basically takes a felony in order to lose your job, being convicted of a felony. And that can't exist. It cannot exist in an organization like this that has a zero-fail mission, and it can't exist in other parts of the government as well. Accountability, merit, being held to some level of, serious standards. That's what this is about. But it's been watered down. And certainly after this, it's extremely disappointing to see, that it has taken this long and yet we're still not seeing, as much information as we should see by now.
Was it Cheadle and Rowe and the previous administration? Is this a problem of identity politics and mediocrity that dates back prior to the previous administration in terms of diluting the quality of the agency and its personnel, or how do you explain that the downward trajectory of the Secret Service's performance, if you agree with that premise?
I absolutely think that's part of it. Well, 100%. I sat there in, I think it was 2007, 2008 in our headquarters, having to attend certain meetings that had nothing to do with job performance or the quality of work or going out and doing advanced work like this. It had to do with all these other things that are special interest projects that we've seen get escalated over the years. And absolutely that has something to do with it. It wears on the people that are there that want to do a good job, expect to do a good job, but have to worry about these other inconsequential things as to the true performance of what the mission of the Secret Service is. And it's not just the Secret Service; it certainly exists in all of the agencies. That has to change, and it appears it's in the process of slowly changing with the new administration. But there's no question that this is not. What happened on July 13th, and I'm pretty sure I said it to you a year ago, is a culmination of a lot of many small catastrophic breakdowns that all came to a head on that day and were a result of not only general mission failure, but also human resource failure, training failure.
It also just seems like there's some maybe like general a general lack of awareness of what is in place. I mean, the one hand, I use the cover that there's no best practices statement in place, so I don't know what to do. And then there is a best practices statement in place, and I still didn't do what I was supposed to do, and I'm not being held to account. And I mentioned this to Susan Crabtree yesterday. We had former FBI Special Agent Thomas Baker on the show earlier in the week, and he was part of the team that investigated the John Hinckley assassination attempt against Reagan. And one of the things that he said about this report that came out that suggests that they didn't know, the Secret Service didn't know how to get classified threat information that they received 10 days prior to July 13th down to the state and local. They didn't know how to, essentially process that information to get to state and local so that they could look at classified information. And Thomas Baker said, what are they talking about? We've had a protocol for that, back 20 or 25 years, where somebody at the state and local level, these interagency task forces, has a classified security clearance and so is able to review information from the federal agency that obtains this information so that they are looped in and there is that communication. And yet that didn't happen in this case in Butler.
Well, I find that having heard that now come out over the last several months to be quite ludicrous. Having had access to and worked with classified information in my career, something as serious as a threat to the president or a former president or a candidate can be watered down through the chain of command. It doesn't have to come out in the exact form.
Right. Yeah, right.
Classified information came. So the fact that somebody didn't get that information down to the planners is absolutely ridiculous. And things could be shared with the local and state law enforcement in a much more, redacted way, if you will. So,
but you can communicate the gist of it, right? I mean, that's the important thing, right?
Absolutely. And if there's a threat in general, well, what more do you need? I mean, if there's specificity to the threat, certainly you should be looking for how to mitigate, something like that. But in general, like what's going on now, we see crowdfunding going on, calling for, further attacks. That's yes, it has to be corroborated, but it should be massive red flags. And so for anybody at the top to have gotten classified information, that should have made its way down to the planners in a way that, need to know it can be clean. And just say, listen, we're stepping things up here. We're going to go through more checks and balances. I mean, it's things as simple as that. And then that's where you get into the supervisory level here is they should have known, which means even if you're not yet telling that brand new agent who's responsible for doing one piece of this, you're then going to make sure, though, that they've done everything they should have done, knowing what at that little higher level or that little more piece of need to know to describe it simply. And it doesn't appear that happened.
Well, and the other thing, too, is, it's like when the most obvious things do not receive a credible explanation, mea culpa, just explain it. People make mistakes. They make glaring mistakes. I get it. But they try to sort of make it overly complicated so that it's opaque. It gives you sort of like accountability theater. We looked at it. We had a task force. We had a commission. We examined it. There was some miscommunication. It's all very gobbledygook corporate speak. Why, elevated position with a view towards the podium where the president was going to be at. Why wasn't somebody there? Have we gotten like a simple, satisfactory human answer to that question?
No, I haven't heard one, and you're right. I mean, I've heard plenty of people accept responsibility for the overall failure of the day, and so with that, then it shouldn't be difficult to want to have transparency and accountability about what the specifics were of that failure. I quite frankly think it's embarrassing that you had to have all these blue ribbon panels and these other people that have little to no experience doing protection come out and make recommendations for the agency that's, really, in my opinion, the premier agency on doing this. They had a very, very bad day. But these things are all part of, organization 101 with over the years when things go wrong, we have to improve. We have to build those back in and learn and make it part of our training cycles and things like that. And if those weren't occurring over and over and over, then it is a cancer within the agency as far as its ability to reform.
With respect to the new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, your former colleagues, maybe current colleagues. Are we turning a page here? You know, I don't want to get too excited because I remember when Trump appointed Christopher Wray to replace Jim Comey, and that didn't work out nearly as well as advertised. And so just because it's a Trump appointee doesn't mean that the agency is going to be, reformed down to the studs where perhaps that is required. What's your assessment?
So it's a great question. I think Secret Service is a little bit different than the FBI. You got to remember the current director spent a good chunk of his life daily in the presence of the now president and developed a very close relationship because of his job as the supervisor of his protective detail. Mm-hmm. And so I think it does speak volumes that, especially under the circumstances, that the president appointed Director Curran to lead the charge now. I think that should be encouraging to everyone. I think the fact that he, as the supervisor of that detail, went through what he went through on that day and leading up to it and then days that follow, I think will make him a better person to lead the Secret Service through this reform. And so I personally feel a lot better about it. I've heard good things from some of my colleagues that are still there. There's no negativity per se, but change did need to happen, and hopefully there's continued change that is going to occur.
Mike Olson is a retired Secret Service agent. He's also the co-founder and owner of 360 Security Services. That's 360security.services. Mike Olson, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights.
You're welcome, Dan. Have a great day.
You too. And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560.